Battle of the Network shows. Join Rick Brooks and Mike Kogel as they explore the TV of the 70s and 80s through hand-picked episodes of their favorite and not-so-favorite series.
Welcome to another Battle of Network shows bonus episode. I'm Mike.
And I'm Rick. Hello, everyone.
And this episode is a List-o-rama. We're going to do a list and kind of a follow-up on a previous one we did. So why don't you explain this list?
Yeah, before we did TV shows of the 70s and 80s that we thought should have or could have been comic books. And this time we're going to go the other way and pick comic books from the era that we think should have or could have been TV shows, interesting TV shows, things we wish that maybe somebody would have made. And this covers a lot of ground, so I think this will be pretty interesting, but we don't discuss our choices beforehand, so we're going to give each other our list, alternating, but there'll be surprises to each of us, so there might be some overlap here, but we just don't know until we get going.
Why don't you go first?
Me go first, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to go with what I think might have been the best idea that they missed out on. Maybe you have this on yours, but my number one is Legion of Superheroes that I could have seen as like a Filmation teen live action series.
Ooh.
You've got a wide variety of characters. Budget might have been an issue, but Legion of Superheroes, of course, is the DC comic set in the future, the distant future. Could leave Superboy out of it. Sometimes he's been on and off affiliated with them, but I think that would have been a cool show. You would have gotten a lot of actual teenagers you could have had, and a show geared towards youth. A sci-fi theme would have fit nicely in with all the other shows of the era that many of them Filmation did, but that kind of Saturday morning live action Legion of Superheroes.
And at least a couple of them could have also had a band.
That's right. Yes, you could have gotten in lots of musical numbers in there too. I think it would have been natural.
No, that's a good choice. I didn't think of that. But,
thank you.
And I know it is a comic that traditionally has had a very big specific following. And sort of, people call it like the DC's X-Men.
Yeah.
In terms of it being complicated and a little bit soap opera-y and a lot of cool costumes and things.
Yeah, I think because of with so much going on, you could have cheaped out on the action and done more of almost a soap opera-ish thing, which might not have been the show I would have wanted to watch, but I could see them doing that, and I think it could have worked out that way. So
yeah, sometime in the 2000s they had a cartoon that was okay. All right, my first one, I think I'm gonna go. This is one would feature characters who did feature in other shows at times. I think this would be a cartoon, either Marvel 2-in-1 or Marvel Team Up.
Ooh.
I think would have been a cool way to cover lots of Marvel characters. So both of those comics were ones that paired different Marvel characters. So Marvel 2-in-1 was The Thing and various people. And of course, The Thing appeared on a couple Fantastic Four cartoons and his own cartoon. And then Marvel Team Up was SpiderMan and other characters. And I can imagine, especially, either of them in the style of SpiderMan and his Amazing Friends. But from a financial end, I'm sure they would have chosen SpiderMan.
Yeah.
But I think Marvel 2-in-1 would be cooler, just because it's more unique.
Right.
But anyway, it would be a way to get in all these characters that people want to see and have adventures and treat the Marvel Universe the way people want it to be, connected and all of that, but maybe, not as complicated as having Spider-Man have two friends.
Right. Yeah.
The same two friends. I guess in animation it's complicated to come up with designs for characters you only use once or something, and it probably would have ended up half the time it was Spider-Man and the same character, but ideally it would have been different every time.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I had Marvel Team Up on my list, actually.
Oh, okay.
And I was kind of going it from a very similar angle, but what kind of I was thinking of was that they did a Batman Brave and the Bold cartoon a few years back that was kind of more comedic and got you the chance to do a lot of characters. And I was kind of thinking that Spider-Man would have lent itself well to that, like kind of a more comedic, even doing some parody kind of stuff. And maybe I'm kind of taking some more postmodern sensibilities and trying to see if they would do it like in the late 70s or something. But if anybody could do that, any character could do that kind of approach, Spider-Man would have been great for it. And I would have loved to have seen a cartoon with Spider-Man teaming up with different people and kind of having just a lot of fun with it. And I like that choice a lot. And I think that was kind of a missed opportunity to do that kind of tone with Spider-Man, more of a comedy one, geared less towards kids and not necessarily adults, but maybe just a more comedic Spider-Man, which is somebody you didn't really see in other media, despite being known as a wisecracking character in the comic books.
Yeah, no, I like that approach too.
And I'd love to see the Thing too. Marvel 2-in-1 would be great too.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Okay.
I guess. Well, you just covered one of yours, but.
Oh. Well.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I guess my next one I would go early 70s to mid 70s ish. Green Lantern, Green Arrow.
Yeah.
Think of it, going from the Dennis O'Neil and Neil Adams socially relevant period of Green Lantern and Green Arrow. They turned it into basically like almost a road story, and I think even some of the stories like Green Lantern, they were basically going to find America, which really seems to lend itself well to shows with like wandering, like Kung Fu or something like that of this 1970s, and you get your social messages in there. And there was a built-in excuse because in the comic books, I think Green Lantern was trying not to use his ring.
That's right.
And so they would just be driving around with one of the Guardians actually.
Yeah.
And Black Canary was involved, but you could really get into the issues, but just have two superheroes just kind of going around to find America. I think that'd be kind of a cool TV show. I'd like to see that.
Plus, if they did the episode where Speedy was a heroin addict.
Yeah, of course. I mean, in the comic books they got into like racism and rent control or whatever, drug use and all kinds of things, and just the economy, the ecology, the environment, things like that. It would be interesting to see, and I think it's something that you could have done without spending a lot of money, frankly. So
yeah. All right. My next one is actually a DC comic that I read recently, which is called The Forever People.
Ooh.
So if you've heard of Jack Kirby, the artist and writer, he had a lot of involvement in the early days of Marvel, or the creation of the Marvel that everyone knows, but also just had this wild imagination. In the 70s, he moved to DC and did these kind of interconnected books about this thing called the Fourth World, and DC keeps using parts of that in their cartoons, and they were like their Justice League movie had elements of that, and they're going to do a New Gods movie apparently, and that is based on that. So one of the comics was called Forever People, and it's sort of about these space hippies on Earth, essentially, so the Fourth World involves these two planets, Apocalypse and New Genesis, who've traditionally kind of been at war. Apocalypse is horrible, and New Genesis is sort of this paradise. So they're from that, and they're coming to Earth because the people from Apocalypse are trying to invade Earth. But also, they're just kind of there to have a good time, I guess. Mm. So what makes this would be a cartoon. Like, as soon as I was reading it, I'm like, boy, this just seems like a cartoon in a really cool way. But so, one, they all look very unique. So there's Beautiful Dreamer, who's the one female member. Big Bear, who's like a giant dude with a beard but no mustache. Mm. Seraphim, who's the youngest member. He dresses up like a cowboy. A guy called Viking, and Mark Moonrider. And they drive around in like this super Jack Kirby vehicle that's like kind of like a motorcycle with 5 seats and can transform into different shapes, and then they have one of these mother box things, and this was the most cartoon thing to me because when it happens in issue, it doesn't happen in every issue, but when it does, it plays like the scene in a cartoon where someone is like putting on their costume, or like He-Man's transforming or whatever. They like join hands and they say this phrase, and then they switch places with this other guy called the Infinity Man, who comes and solves their problems, and then they switch places back with him. So I think this would have been like a really cool, wild cartoon.
Yeah.
Of course, if they made it look really like Jack Kirby stuff, it would be very vivid and strange. And they're kind of like roaming around America in this big motorcycle. They meet Superman and stuff, but for the most part, they're on their own. And they like a couple issues they deal with like this sadistic amusement park that I think Desaad is running, and to torture people unbeknownst to them because it's an amusement park, but it's really a torture thing and things like that. And like they deal with like a sort of evangelist guy who's preaching the religion of Apocalypse.
Wow, sounds pretty good. I'm not familiar. I heard of that comic book, but I didn't really know the details of it. And it sounds like a
If you want super weird Jack Kirby, that's a good one to check out.
Something that would be a very entertaining cartoon. Like probably no matter when it would have been made, it would have been ahead of its time.
Yeah.
But I would have loved to have seen it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let me next go with, how about this one? There was a time in the early 80s when I think kind of after Indiana Jones came out and was real popular, that period pieces became kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And I really loved a comic book called Star Squadron.
Uh-huh.
And it was sort of like a reimagining of the Justice Society, but sort of explaining like what were some of those Earth 2 characters in DC doing during World War II. And this was Roy Thomas's sort of re-envisioning of Earth 2 and kind of explained. But it took place directly during the war years, and had all kinds of these cool characters and some heroes that were made specifically for the comic book that weren't otherwise tied into like specific points in continuity. But it wasn't meant to redo the continuity, but it was kind of like filling in gaps in the actual comic books and everything. And I would have loved to have seen a series of that. I don't know how they could have done it, but I just kind of go back and think of like shows like Tales of the Gold Monkey. And even a little bit before that, Wonder Woman started out like as a period piece.
Yeah.
And I wasn't old enough to really, know why or whatever, but it just seems like around that time period, World War II nostalgia was they thought that there was a mark in that. So I could see this as kind of a realistic way to get into superheroes. And it seemed like actually it would have been a couple of years before the comic came out, because I think it started in 1981, but maybe in that 78, 79 window when they were making TV and movies of everything after the Superman movie. It seems like maybe they could have given this a shot, and it would be a way to do superheroes without directly involving like the big ones that were tied up in other properties.
Yeah.
So, like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman would be out, but you'd have like Hawkman and some of the other ones in there.
And we know TV could make a great Hawkman costume.
Yes, we do. Yes. But yeah, I would love to have seen any World War II. The Marvel one was like the Invaders, and I thought that would be pretty cool too. But
yeah,
I haven't read those really as much. So.
Right. And that was Roy Thomas too.
Yeah.
Clearly, he was into a thing. All right, my next one is connected to the last one in a way. This would be, I think this could be either a cartoon or a sort of Doctor Who style live action, or like the Weekend live action. Jimmy Olsen and the Newsboy Legion.
Ooh.
So another comic Jack Kirby did was a Jimmy Olsen comic, although I think it was keeping with the tradition of that comic, which was Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen, getting into all sorts of outrageous hijinks with monsters and, all sorts of science fiction-y stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that just seems like a really fun way to do it, and not have, Superman is in that comic a lot, but I think you could do it without Superman. And then the Newsboy Legion is in the 40s. Kirby and Joe Simon did a Newsboy Legion comic for DC, and this version, so it was a bunch of like street kids who were newsboys who helped out the Guardian, and in this version it's the kids of the original Newsboy Legion. But they all have very specific identities. They're very kind of like Bowery Boys. There's Tommy Tompkins, the leader. Big Words, the smart guy.
Big word.
Gabby, the kid who talks a lot. Scrapper, the tough guy. And then in this version, they also introduced Flippa Dippa, who is... copied this from Wikipedia, but I think it's accurate. He was obsessed with and very capable at underwater maneuvers. So he's African American, but he's usually wearing a scuba gear.
Huh.
And just anytime water comes up, he's like, "That's my thing."
Wow.
And he's always hoping there's water involved. So in these Jimmy Olsen comics, they also have like this supercar that they ride around in, and those comics are just the Kirby ones are crazy. Like they involve like underground, like this whole underground kind of world near Metropolis, and like the secret project where they're cloning all the Newsboy Legion and Jimmy and Superman, and they're like tiny and giant clones of them running around. And later, Superman and Jimmy deal with like these people who look like movie monsters or from some experimental miniature planet. It's just, there's a Loch Ness Monster one. It's nuts. And I get the impression that's always what the Jimmy Olsen comic was. It's just him getting into crazy messes.
Yeah. Wow.
And I think that could be fun in either context. Cartoon would be cheaper, but
yeah,
I would kind of like to see a live action one.
Yeah. I mean, describing it sounds really good. And the Jack Kirby DC stuff is like a big hole in my comics reading.
Yeah.
So I'm not familiar with a lot of that, but it sounds like it would be entertaining fodder for all kinds of different TV shows. And that sounds really cool.
And it's from the period when Morgan Edge had bought the Daily Planet and was conniving with Darkseid or Inner Gang to manipulate it for his own purposes.
Right.
And the Guardian's in that too, or a clone of the Guardian.
Wow.
Yeah.
A lot going on with all that stuff.
Yep.
I like it. All right, let me see. Okay, how about this one? This seems like maybe that something might have been suggested, or maybe that they hoped it would happen. But as far as I know, it never did, or never got off the ground. But when I was a kid, I read all kinds of comics. I read, more serious ones. I read the funny animal ones. But DC had a comic book that combined funny animals with superheroes, and that was Captain Carrot and his amazing zoo crew. And I could totally see. I'm not saying it would have been good,
right?
But I could totally see like a 1980s animated series of this on ABC, I'm thinking, for some reason, of maybe because, kind of associate them with
Bugs
Super
Bunny.
Friends.
Yeah.
But they had Captain Carrot and his zoo crew was like, there was like a turtle who ran super fast and a Yankee Poodle and all these these characters, and like the version of the JLA I think was the Just a Lot of Animals instead of the Justice League of America. But it was Roy Thomas again and Scott Shaw. I think were the co-creators of that, and somehow they've remained in continuity through the years. But at the time, it was just kind of a pure, like, kind of a cool little, like, humor comic book, and I really enjoyed it at the time, and I think it got wiped out by Crisis on Infinite Earths, as many things were, probably.
Yeah.
But I could have seen there being a cartoon of that, and I would have liked to have seen it.
Yeah, I don't know how there wasn't.
Yeah.
I mean, because I don't know the comic that well, but I know what it looks like, and it looks like a cartoon.
Yeah, it looks like storyboard ideas or, like, concept art for an animated series.
Yeah.
It could easily have been one, it seems like.
Yeah, there was that like terrible sci-fi Looney Tunes thing, right, from like 5 or 6 years ago. Or 10,
yeah,
whatever that was called.
Yeah, I don't think I even saw any of that.
I think I just saw one episode, but that just seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And I know they are still around because I think they're in one of the 52 Earths. But I believe in the comics, the current Young Justice comic, they were going to go to the Earth with Captain Carrot.
That sounds like a good plan.
What about the Flaming Carrot?
You know what? I considered him because I really like that comic book, but that might be too bizarre even for.
I don't know much about that one either.
Yeah.
Was that one of the big black and whites?
It was black and whites. Yeah, it was a black and white, and I think moved around to different publishers.
Yeah.
But it was unique.
All right. So my next one actually comes from the newspaper funnies.
Ooh.
And it probably is. I think it predates this era, but it will still exist now and was going on then. This would be one of your live action weekend shows, a Mark Trail show.
Oh, all right.
Because it would have adventure.
Yeah.
And animals.
Yeah.
And then him being a little bit smug in telling us about animals. Like PSAs at the end.
Yes, very good.
And tidbits of trivia and stuff.
I like that.
Maybe even the bumpers could have him, like, anteaters eat 1,000 ants a day.
Yeah, like little fun
Did
facts.
you know?
Right.
Yeah. And, like, in the comic, he has some kid. I don't know how long that kid's been around. But,
right.
I'm sure if that kid wasn't around back then, they could have introduced a kid.
Of course.
Or different kids every week or something. Probably a pair of kids, really.
Yeah.
You Mark and, like, an annoying boy and an annoying girl.
Yeah. I could totally see that. I could definitely see them getting some bland leading man type looks without the charisma necessarily.
Right.
To play Mark Trail.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Filming at some animal park.
Yep. And you get the educational element. It seems like to me that would have been a pretty easy sell. I don't know if they ever try that or not, but that seems like a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
I like that one. That's good. All right, next up I've got kind of a bizarre. It was only 4 issues, I believe, in the 1970s, but it was Prez. By Joe Simon, and it was about a teenager who became president of the United States.
Right.
And I guess it was timely in the sense that the voting age was lowered from 21 to 18 around the time, I think. And then this comic book came out kind of playing up on that. And it was a very bizarre comic book because, like, the main villain, I think his name was actually Boss Smiley, but it was a guy that his head was actually a smiley face. And it wasn't, like, commented on as being weird or anything. And also there was, like, supernatural elements. There was a werewolf in one comic and a totally wild story, but it was, it seemed like a way to discuss the generation gap, maybe without some of these odd things, but it's kind of an interesting idea. I guess the premise that they built up was, like, things weren't working right, and this guy, Prez, he was able to actually figure out how to make the clocks work, and everybody was so impressed by that it catapulted him into this career because the other people couldn't figure out how to make the clocks. Like literally
literal clocks.
Yeah, like actual clocks. So instead of like making the trains run on time, I guess, well, he made the clocks work, and that made him a big success. And he had like a cabinet with other young people and everything. And it wasn't necessarily youth versus adults, but they could have done that. And I think it could have been an interesting thing. Like, I guess maybe the comic book was sort of playing on maybe a fear that, if young people organize and all these hippies, they'll put what if they put a young person in office, which you have to be 35 years old to run for president. But it'd be an interesting thing. I would like to see like a live action, not even a weekend thing, but actually like a 1970s. I could see like a drama or even a dramedy, kind of looking at some youth running for president even.
So the clocks had just stopped working?
Well, I'm not exactly sure or remember, but he figured out some. Yeah, they just accepted them, I guess.
Yeah.
I think the idea was more like complacency.
Okay.
Like they just accepted the way things were, and just and this boss controlled like everything, and they didn't want to challenge things or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of I believe 4 issues in the early 70s.
Yeah.
and was revived recently, which I didn't read. The Mark Russell, who did the Snagglepuss
right.
and the Flintstones. I think he did a version with like a female, I think,
Okay.
in the lead role.
Well, that's interesting. So this is my last one, at least. This is one I'm going to call Bill Host's Laugh Parade.
Yeah, I know this.
So, Laugh Parade is, I mean, Bill Host has passed away, but the comics still appear, I think, in Parade magazine.
Mm-hmm.
So there's Howard Hughes, which is about a huge dog,
Mm-hmm.
and then just like a couple random ones, right?
Yeah,
Like non-character specific. Yeah, gag. But he's also the guy that did the Lockhorns about the miserable married couple.
Mm-hmm.
And another one I don't remember, but called Agatha Crumb, who's like an old lady who owns a cookie factory or something.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
And he also had one with the National Enquirer about cars or something.
Huh.
But I don't think that lasted very long.
Okay.
So my idea would be to not just take the Howard Hughes and the gags, but also the Lockhorns and the Agatha Crumb, and combine them all into a laugh-in style show.
Oh wow.
So a bunch of hit and run sketches featuring, because that's how, the Lockhorns, and they're all one panel comics.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all gags anyway. So
Yeah.
you could just cut from Howard Hughes, whatever happened there, to maybe have like a puppet, kind of like the Barkley from Sesame Street, and then, cut to one of the Lockhorns making a pithy remark about their marriage to one of these other gags. And
Right.
just, so you get some good, I'm trying to imagine, like, 70s people who could play the Lockhorns.
Like Jerry Stiller and Ann Mira.
Yeah.
The two on the nose.
Yeah. Because I wasn't thinking Ann Mira, but I was thinking Mrs. Costanza. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, although, I don't know if Jerry Stiller was yelling a lot before Seinfeld. That seems like a Seinfeld specific thing.
Yeah. I think
Because I just feel like all of those lines are just read like this, very...
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of slow burns in there, but...
maybe you get like a good character actor, like the guy that played one of the... I can't remember his name now, but the guy that played, I think it was Vinny on The Odd Couple, kind of had a look like that with like balding on top and could have pulled that off, and he was a big character actor. But I would have... Anything with the Lockhorns, I like this whole concept. If they would have done like a half hour like Flintstones style sitcom, because that was another thing with like in the 70s they had like this little trend in the early 70s of like wait till your father gets home, and like sitcoms with laugh tracks
that were animated.
Yeah, and they could have definitely done a Lockhorns one, but I also like this laugh-in type, something for everybody.
Yeah.
It's great.
Those are all mine.
Awesome.
You had a couple.
I have a couple honorable mentions, I guess. I could mention briefly would be, one thing I would say is like the one that I would have been, I think is a brilliant idea they're already doing as of the taping. We know that there's a What If series coming.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea, and to do it as animation is great too.
Yeah.
I love that comic book as a kid, and I think that's just outstanding. I think that's one of the low-key awesome things that has been announced for this Disney Plus service.
Yeah.
But kind of another one that I used to read was their humor comic, Not Brand Ek.
Mm-hmm.
I guess a play on Brand X, which they would refer to like, well, DC would be the competition, like or generic Brand X comics or whatever. So it was a humor comic book, and I thought it was really cool as a kid. Maybe looking now it wouldn't hold up, but just do some kind of animation series like that. Sort of like maybe like Robot Chicken, I guess would be sort of an equivalent, but maybe something like in an earlier animation style, more without just actual animation, some kind of humor thing. I thought would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
And just the only other one I had was Mr. Monster, which was like a 1980s comic book. I think Michael T. Gilbert took like maybe an old character from like the golden age of comic books, and he was like Doc Stearns. He was like a monster hunter, and he combined like distinctive art with like Mr. Monster had a cool uniform and good girl art and that kind of thing, and just sort of paying homage to like a lot of, I think, like old horror comics and things like that. I kind of envisioned it maybe again as like an animated series, but for some reason I'm kind of thinking like as an experimental thing, like on an HBO or something like that in the 80s. They could have done something with that and kind of have like a Monster of the Week kind of thing with this kind of superhero horror comic thing. So I think it was Eclipse Comics, I think, published it originally in the 1980s and been around through the years. But yeah, those would be my choices.
Yeah. A couple other things I can think of that would maybe be cool. I've never read Nexus, but I watched a documentary on Amazon about Steve Rude, the artist. That's pretty interesting. I mean, He's a very unique dude. In fact, he calls himself just a dude, Steve the dude. But just because his art style is very classic, kind of cartooning art style, and I think they tried to get various animated projects done and haven't, but it just looks like it would be a cool science fiction kind of, and again maybe on HBO or something, because I think it was a little mature. And then I'm not sure if this might have been early 90s, but and I think they were developing it at some point, but Marvel's Damage Control, which the original comic was, the idea is they're the people that clean up after all the disasters and stuff, and they are in the MCU. They're mentioned in Spider-Man Homecoming, at least, as a thing that like Tony Stark started for that purpose, but the comic was very funny. It was like just a period where Marvel was doing some humorous comics, like the She-Hulk that John Byrne did. It just seems like anything like that where the superheroes are kind of in the background is appealing to me.
Yeah, waited to do superheroes without directly doing superheroes every week. And
I know that like that NBC sitcom a year or two ago tried a similar thing.
It was Powerless or something. Yeah,
but just seemed like I didn't watch it, but it seemed terrible.
Yeah, right.
But I like the idea of that, and it's a way to save money too.
Yeah.
You don't have to show all this stuff.
Right. I mean, that's like a lot of our concepts. We're talking about like animation or something. Or I was trying to think of things that might be actually realistic to do, and some of these you definitely have to make some compromise of some kind. But hey, you have to do that all the time. But
speaking of HBO, or maybe Cinemax could have done Howard Chaykin's Black Kiss. Which I never read too. But
yeah, I never read that one.
I was certainly not of the right age to be reading that.
I wasn't even really like American Flag reader, and that was
Yeah,
and
I don't know the whole deal with that exactly.
Yeah,
there's a lot of those independent comics from that period.
Yeah,
that, I think maybe people forget about. Or
like
the Ninja Turtles is a famous one that became not independent, but
it's like at the time of the independent, when the indie comics boom was happening, like at that time, there wasn't like a matching boom of outlets that might be able to produce or pay for that kind of content.
Right.
Like now, there's all kinds of stuff, but back then there were so many places you could take that kind of property and do something with it. So there are probably a lot less options.
Yeah. All right, that's our List-o-rama.
Cool. Yeah. Let us know if there's anything that we didn't cover. Do you think whenever we do these list episodes, we get some really good ideas from other people? So I'd love to hear from the listeners.
I guess the other one would just be any of the soapy comics, would probably. If you could somehow manage to not make them just regular soap operas, but capture the unique appeal of a soap opera comic strip.
Right.
Whether that means being even slower than a regular, I don't know.
Be a challenge, but a worthy one, I think.
Yeah, a very worthy one.
Exactly. Join us next time for another exciting episode of Battle of the Network Shows. Learn more, leave feedback, and suggest future episodes at battleofthenetworkshows.com. Follow us on Twitter at BatNetShows, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Battle of the Network Shows.